Hey guys, well, we're officially past the halfway point of the home and away season in the 2025 AFLW. Well, without further ado, before we dive into round 7, we first need to look back at how I did with my round 6 predictions. And without further ado, we start with Hawthorn versus Collingwood, which I had Hawthorn winning. I saw a few people tipping Collingwood, and I thought, no, you're being a little bit too optimistic. And to be honest, I was very much proven right, as Hawthorn was just a much more classier team than the Pies. And actually, surprisingly, I didn't really see Collingwood's signature scrappiness, as Hawthorn was kind of easy, made a lot of easy work of them and actually scored a lot before Collingwood went on a little run near the end, but unfortunately it wasn't enough. And Hawthorn once again escapes with a win. And then we go to the next game and, the robbery. One of the most ridiculous calls. By the way, the AFL has come out and said that the intentional behind was an incorrect call. But to be honest, Geelong was the better team of the day, and they probably did deserve to win, regardless if the win felt kind of illegitimate. Then I had North Melbourne winning by 53, and a number I pulled completely out of thin air turned out to be the actual margin. What the heck? You can go back to the video. I am not lying here. I predicted the exact margin for this game. I don't know how I did that. That is insane. And then, anyway, after that, I had Freo winning by 14, and they just smoked Essendon. I thought Essendon was an alright team, but, the last 2 weeks, they have just been new. So, hopefully we'll see them. Maybe they can make a bounce back this week, but, actually, no, I just realised that their opponents this week. No, they're not bouncing back this week. Oh, dear, poor Essendon. And then, Sydney Derby, massive upset. GWS has won, I believe, their first back-to-back games in, forever. That was an amazing win. Good on, Garnett, who's obviously she's one of my favourite players. It was so great in her 50th to get this big upset of a win. And, is GWS good now? Then, obviously, we had Melbourne versus West Coast, and I think West Coast got a bit of a reality check as Melbourne smoked them by 51 points. I got the digits right, just needed to flip them around the other way. I had Brisbane winning by 38, and they won by 25. I think the Bulldogs actually put in a decent performance compared to their opposition, but yeah, it was Brisbane who was going to win. And then I tipped the upset. I tipped that Richmond would beat St Kilda, and they were close. They were close, but St Kilda obviously edged over to just win. And then Adelaide did the Geelong game again, where they were losing for 3 quarters and then just smoked their opposition in the last quarter. They just seem to love doing this. I don't know what it is about Adelaide and these, leaving it to the final quarter to win. But regardless, let's get into round 7. And I am really excited for this round because I am going to be in Melbourne for these games. So all the games in Melbourne, I will be attending. Without further ado, we have a Thursday night game again, which is nice. We have Geelong versus Hawthorns. Of course, I'll be on a 10-hour bus/train ride to get to Geelong in time for the game all of Thursday, which will start at 7:15. And obviously, these two teams are looking pretty solid. Obviously, Hawthorn just keeps finding ways to win every game except the Adelaide one. And obviously, Geelong has had 3 really solid wins in a row. The odds have Hawthorn winning, and I think that's partly because Hawthorn actually won this game last year, and I think one of the highest scoring games in AFLW history. Both teams had over 50. It was insane. But yeah, obviously Hawthorn, despite the fact they can't seem to kick goals, their defence is, I think, the best in the league. Outside of maybe North Melbourne, they've restricted less scoring shots than any other team. But on the other hand, again, Geelong is looking pretty solid, and I think I could see the Cats winning this game, but just to the sheer fact that Hawthorn seems to always just hold on in these games, I'm going to have them win in a really nail-biter. I think I'll have them win by 3. Then we go over to, we have a Friday game. In fact, this is 1 o'clock on a Friday, because I believe Melbourne's got to have a public holiday for the AFL Grand Final. So all the games are going to be on Friday instead of Saturday this week. So without further ado, Melbourne versus Gold Coast at Casey's Field. I'm trying to question how I get out to this ground, because it's in the middle of nowhere. But regardless of how I get to the game, obviously, let's talk about the game itself. And Gold Coast, gave Adelaide a scare for 3 quarters before just getting completely smashed. And as much as I think, Gold Coast, like GWS, seems to be building into something this year, I think Melbourne's going to give them a harsh reality check and sort of just blow them off the park and win by, let's say, 34. Then we have poor old Essendon versus North Melbourne. Obviously, this is a matchup I've actually already seen because I watched the preseason game between these two teams in Werribee. However, North Melbourne arguably looks stronger than what their preseason game was. I think they're just going to do even bigger number than us. And that game was like, what, 98-17. I could easily see this game potentially going even crazier than that and seeing North Melbourne get their second ton as they kick over 100. And I'll just say, throw a big number there. I'll say win by 64. Then we have Carlton versus Fremantle at Icon Park at 5:05 on the Saturday. One of these games is really close. I think the betting odds and the tipping odds are kind of roughly around the 50-50 mark here, and I can sort of see why. These teams are both very evenly matched. Carlton won in this matchup last year. I think that was at Fremantle, and I think weirdly Fremantle's a team that seems to play better away than they do at home. And it's for this reason I think they'll probably win this game. But I think both these teams have really good defenses with Driscoll and Fremantle, and probably Schultz, obviously rising star last week. So I do think this could be a very low scoring game, but I think Freo will edge the win by another close game. I think they'll win it by 5 in another nail biter. All right, and then for the Friday night game, it's Bulldogs versus Collingwood at Mission Whitten Oval at 7:15. Last time these two teams played, the Dogs won, but since then both teams have kind of been on different trajectories. Obviously, the Collingwood's had a really decent year after a bit of a rough start. They obviously bet the Giants, and then they almost bet Melbourne, and then they bet Sydney of all teams. Although Sydney has been looking shaky recently. But on the other hand, the Dogs, they had that amazing win against Richmond in round 2, but as we've seen, Richmond's kind of dropped the ball this year. So it's for that reason I think the Pies will definitely be the small favourite team, and they've definitely got the odds on their side. I think, they'll be back to their sort of scrappy self, because I remember there was that Bulldogs-Hawthorn game a few weeks ago that was really low scoring, so I think this one also can be a bit of another low scoring game, but I think the Pies will edge out a win by, let's say, 10. All right, so we have to jump over to Sunday now, because obviously Saturday is the AFL Grand Final. For the game I'm most excited to see, St Kilda versus Port Adelaide at RSEA Park in Moorabbin. Once again, the odds are a bit weird on this one, because when I checked the tipping odds, they had St Kilda massively up, but then the betting odds had us winning, so it was a bit strange. But obviously last year Port had that game where I think we kicked 5 goals in the first quarter and then just sort of slowly lost the lead over the game, but obviously held on to win. However, this year, obviously I think a lot of people are looking positive at St Kilda. Obviously they bet Adelaide and they bet Essendon quite handedly. And I think a lot of people are thinking that maybe they could possibly take us on. But I don't know. I feel like Port Adelaide plays St Kilda really well. We only just lost to them in our first year. And then we got our first away win against them at Moorabbin. And then obviously the game last year. So I think we're actually in a pretty solid position to do well at this game. Also, I should mention that Port Adelaide has Piper Window and Cheyenne Hammond coming back into the team, which hopefully should boost the run numbers. And also, I think Young is going to have a much stronger game than she had last week. I think she played well last week, but this week, against a slightly weaker opponent, I think she's going to have a breakout game. I think we're going to see, I'm hoping, we'll see her debut goal this week. And I think we'll just, put out a solid performance. Maybe not dominate. Let's say we'll win by 15. All right, that's enough talking about Port Adelaide, and let's talk about our crosstown rivals in Adelaide versus Sydney. Thomas Farms Oval, 3:05 on the Sunday. Obviously, these last 3 games I won't be able to watch because they won't be in Melbourne. But regardless, last time these two teams met was in that semi-final in 23, where I think this is a game where Adelaide won the biggest finals margin in AFLW history and pretty much ended Sydney's hope of a prelim. But regardless, obviously, Sydney's definitely been looking really shaky after that Collingwood game and then the Derby loss. Yeah, Sydney has gone from being a star top 4 team to potentially not even making finals this year. And, well, Adelaide, meanwhile, has been going strength to strength. So I think this is going to be a pretty easy win for Adelaide. I don't think I've really seen Sydney really being tested by these sort of stronger teams. And I think Adelaide will win by 32. And it's going to leave you a little worried that Sydney might not actually make finals this year. Meanwhile, a team that definitely won't make finals, we have Brisbane versus Richmond. Brighton Homes Arena at 3:05, also 3:05 on the Sunday. And Richmond's never going to catch a break either. I think they've got Gold Coast next week. I have to check on that. But as it currently stands, if Richmond can't beat St Kilda, who can they beat? They're obviously not going to win this game because I think the Lions are just going to absolutely roll over. The Lions might have kicked another 100. I'm worried Richmond might not even kick 10. So, we'll see how this game goes, but regardless, it's going to be a smashing. I'd say Brisbane by 55. And then finally, we head over to Perth for West Coast versus GWS. Obviously, this is an interesting game because obviously GWS is coming off an amazing upset win, while West Coast is coming off a bit of disappointing loss against the D's. I do think West Coast is going to bounce back, though. I'm not entirely confident that just because GWS has managed to get these 2 wins, that they're suddenly going to dominate. And obviously, West Coast won this matchup last year. And it's for this reason that I think West Coast will hold on, and I think they'll win. Maybe not a big win, but let's say they'll win by 8. So to look back at the tips I had Hawthorn winning by 3, Melbourne by 34, North Melbourne by 64, Fremantle by 5, Collingwood by 10, Port Adelaide by 15, Adelaide by 32, Brisbane by 55, and West Coast by 8. Well, I'm really excited to see a bunch of AFLW games this weekend, so I'll be sure to do I'm hoping to do a vlog of the game so you can see how it went. And I can't wait to be on the sidelines on Sunday watching Port Adelaide versus St Kilda, shouting, "Let's go Power!"